Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Greg. Greg has second. Is there any, I guess, no discussion? So voting, all in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Billy, did you say aye or raise your hand?
I'm sorry. Aye, both.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have unanimous approval of the draft minutes that were circulated. Item number 4, Kahukumauna report. I did not get a report from Shane, but Greg, I'm not sure if maybe you attended their meeting.
I did not receive a report from Shane either, but at their last meeting, they took up the matter of the CSO, EA, and CDUP. And they have, they provided comments to the consultants who have integrated those comments. The primary comments had to do with ensuring that when the EA goes out for public comment, that there is really a robust attempt to ensure broad input. And then secondly, they wanted to ensure adequate cultural monitoring during any ground disturbance, disturbing activities. So both of those will be addressed by the consultants. They did adopt a formal statement. I don't have it in front of me right now. Those minutes approving that formal statement will be approved at this Thursday's meeting. But they basically are affirming that they are okay with the EA and the CDUA.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on to item number 5, Executive Director's Report?
Sure, but first let me apologize. I'm not completely prepared for this evening's meeting. I had a little flare up with my eye today, so I wasn't able to adequately prepare. The one item that I did want to brief folks on, if you are unfamiliar or unaware of the situation, is this has to do with Speaker Psyche's legislative working group. As you may have heard, Representative Nakashima suffered a heart attack last week. And so he is in the hospital, that's all I know. As a result, Bonnie did notify me that over the weekend, she as a member of the working group was notified that the meeting that was previously scheduled for tomorrow has been postponed. Representative Nakashima is supposed to be the chair of the working group. And Bonnie said there were no other information provided as to when it might be rescheduled.
Wow. And that's the first meeting, right, of the group?
That's correct. That would have been the first meeting of the group, yes.
So do you know if it's possible for Psyche to change the named chair?
I believe it is, since he's sponsoring the committee. But yeah, I believe it is possible that he would do that. As you know, Representative Tarnas is also on the working group, so he might be another option. I'm not sure.
I think it's safe to say Mark is going to be offline for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
So being chair is the least of the issues with Mark's situation now.
Yeah.
Well, I really am wondering if it's even possible for him, or if that's a good thing for him to continue his commitment given the situation.
Yeah, it might be difficult.
That's my expectation.
Okay.
Other than that, Roberta, I don't have any other updates. Most of the updates we'll be covering on the, most of the issues I've been working on will be covering on the agenda tonight.
Agenda, okay.
Are there any questions from anyone about anything else though?
I just got a text from Dave Lomborg who's trying to connect. Is anybody aware of any connection issues with the Zoom link? I can resend it to him. Worked okay for me.
Not that I know of.
Okay, I'll text him back.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no questions to the executive director's report, let's move on to item number 6, which is the agenda. The first item is an action item to review and recommend approval of the Caltech submillimeter observatory decommissioning. Basically the introduction of the draft EA and the draft conservation district use permit. So do we need to look at them separately or?
They can be looked at the same time. Jim Hayes Carrie, you can let Jim in now. He's here to provide an overview from PSI. But let me also just provide a little context as well. So as folks may remember, this decommissioning is being done a little differently than how other major projects have been done on the Mauna. Caltech is the applicant on the conservation district use permit, and they are preparing the the EA, which they normally would have done. But in this case, the DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources, will be the accepting agency of the EA. So our review, that doesn't change anything in terms of what our need to review these documents. As the holder of the master lease, DLNR is going to want to know that we have internally reviewed these documents and we're okay with that they adequately address the environmental impacts of the various options that have been evaluated. Now, as you recall, the site decommissioning plan was already approved, which basically lays out in more detail the preferred alternative that they have identified, which is complete removal and complete restoration. A lot of the information in the environmental assessment is duplicative, and some of it is also duplicative in the CDUA as well. Again, the University of Hawaii is not the applicant for this permit, but as landowner or holder of the master lease, we're obligated to ensure that we have given our approval. We've approved what they want to do. So that's the context. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim and Julia from PSI, and Jim can walk us through the documents. He'll also be reviewing the comments that were received from the Environment Committee as well as Kahukuman.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. This is Jim Hayes with Planning Solutions, and I'm assisting Caltech with the preparation of the Environmental Assessment and Conservation District Use application. And we also worked on the site decommissioning plan, of course. And I think you're all familiar with that, as Greg mentioned. And the main thing we wanted to talk about today is the next steps in the EA and the Conservation District Use Permit. Those are the two documents we have in front of the board now. And as Greg mentioned, we've been working with the Kahukumauna Council and the Environment Committee. And I think Greg mentioned earlier that Kahukumauna has drafted a resolution, or whatever they call it, supporting the documents moving forward. So we don't have any comments from them that we need to address at this time. And we've also met with the Environment Committee and spoken with them and received emails from them with some comments. The bulk of their comments had to do with the best management practices that will be implemented as part of the project. And you may recall that there's a long list of best management practices related to everything from water use to invasive species, archaeological monitoring, cultural monitoring, erosion and water quality control measures, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the big ones that they were most interested in was the invasive species monitoring effort. And so we've made a few clarifications and added some additional detail in that plan to address their comments. So that's been helpful. Let's see. Now, our goal is that we work with this board and obtain your approval of the documents, and then the UH president would receive them and sign, as Greg mentioned, as the leaseholder. And then it will be submitted as a package, both the EA and the Conservation District Use application to DLNR, and they will process them simultaneously in parallel. So that's a little different than what people may be accustomed to, but it will speed up the process, we hope. And during the 180-day processing period, the draft EA will be available for public review. The version of the draft EA that you have has a big mark on it that says internal draft. And that is because it hasn't been released for public review yet through the OEQC environmental notice. Of course, when it does go out for official public review, that watermark won't be on there any longer. If we're able to maintain the schedule, we're hopeful that the Board of Land and Natural Resources will issue a conservation district use permit either in December of 2021 or January of 2022. As Greg mentioned, our preferred alternative is the complete removal and full restoration of the site as closely as possible to its pre-construction condition. That includes restoring the topography and restoring the habitat for both the native plants and the native arthropods. Now, the environmental assessment covers a range of topics from archaeology and culture to biology, visual and aesthetic, solid and hazardous waste, air quality, noise. I mean, it runs the full gamut, as you're probably accustomed to in those kinds of documents. And the outcome of the analysis is that there will be no significant impacts. That's why we're able to do this as an environmental assessment instead of an environmental impact statement. Most of the impacts that will result will be positive or beneficial in nature. That includes effects, positive effects for cultural and historic properties by restoring the site to its pre-construction condition, as well as allowing for the recolonization of native arthropods and plants. And that will take some time, but it will be a beneficial effect in the environment there. As part of our effort, we'll be monitoring the effectiveness of the restoration of the site for a period of 3 years after the restoration is complete. During the deconstruction activities, we'll implement our phase 2 sampling and analysis program, and that includes sampling under the observatory slab and under the cesspool to evaluate for potential contaminants. And that will include analysis for mercury and silver and other chemicals that may be associated with film processing or have been a concern from the public related to astronomy in the summit area. But we do not anticipate any adverse effects to groundwater or drinking water. Nor do we expect any significant effects related to traffic. This can be an issue because, of course, it is a construction project in many aspects, even though it's a deconstruction. However, the vehicle traffic that is bringing the facility down to the recycling areas or the landfill will be spread out and will be coordinated with Center for Maunakea Stewardship and other users in the summit region. We also address cumulative impacts in the environmental assessment. And we assess that there'll be an incremental reduction in the cumulative impact. However, there will be no major changes in the level of significant impact that exists today. The impacts that are considered significant now will remain significant, and those that are considered less than significant will remain less than significant. Now, our district use permit application covers all the same ground as the environmental assessment, but it is much briefer, and it contains references back to the draft EA, so that as people read the Conservation District use application, if they want to learn more, they can go to the draft EA to learn more. Of course, the application also covers the 8 criteria that we need to cover related to the conservation district purposes. But that's really the only difference between the two documents. One is brief, one is detailed, but they cover the same ground. So we believe that the EDA, or the EA, and the Conservation District use application clearly state and support why Caltech is selecting the complete removal and full restoration as the preferred alternative, and that the implementation of that alternative will not result in any significant adverse effects. So we thank you for your continued dedication to Mauna Kea and the time you've spent considering these documents and this project. And we hope that we can implement the project successfully and honor Mauna Kea and those in its genealogy by carefully decommissioning the Caltech 7 million meter observatory.
So, Jim, I have a question. Can you just, or maybe this is a question for Greg. So it will be the board, BLNR, that makes the final decision, whether it's complete removal and restoration, or I think there were some partial options that you looked at, right, in your reports.
There is the preferred alternative, which is a complete removal and full restoration. And then there are alternatives. And those alternatives include potential for less than complete removal and less than full restoration, only in the event that we discover some unanticipated condition at the site that would prevent the implementation of the complete removal and full restoration. And we evaluate those alternatives just in case that unanticipated situation crops up. Now, based on all the engineering and analysis that we've done to date, we do not expect any of those. Of course, we don't expect an unanticipated situation, but the Board of Land and Natural Resources is the one that awards the permit, and we expect them to award the permit for the preferred alternative. And should an unanticipated situation arise, we would consult with the appropriate parties, presumably DLNR being one of them, and come to a conclusion as to the correct steps forward.
Okay, thank you.
Now, we only, the only reason that we wouldn't do a full restoration, for example, would be that if we have an unanticipated situation that people believe overcoming that situation would cause more adverse effect than it would fix, right? So if overcoming the situation is actually a negative in the long run, then that's when we would go into that scenario.
Okay.
Other questions?
If no questions, since this is an action item, is the board, board members ready to move forward with a vote? If
Yes.
so, could I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Yeah, approve action and recommendation for approval to the Board of Land and Natural Resources and the University of Hawaii for the Caltech sub-millimeter observatory environmental assessment and conservation district use application.
So move.
Thank you, Billy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Diana. There's a motion to approve and second. There's a motion to approve and second recommendation as stated. Any other final discussions or questions? If not, all in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Unanimous. Okay. Thank you, Jim and Julia, and I see that Sunil is also on the line as well. So thank you very much. We will move to item B, information and discussion, review and comments for the comprehensive management plan, specifically the outcome analysis report or the OAR.
So before Jim and Julia get started, and Sunil, you can drop off if you need to. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and let me just thank the board for their careful review of our document, and thank you very much for the approval.
Thanks, Sunil.
Thank you.
Okay, so the second item that we have tonight is the outcome analysis report. This is the first step in updating the comprehensive management plan. And as I've described it to some of you previously, it's a bit like our own self-assessment, the university's own self-assessment of our implementation of the CMP. It's based on more robust data than Kuivalu had access to, we did have all the information that we have was available to Kuivalu, let me put it that way. But we have gotten more into the details of all of that data that we have based this OAR assessment on. The assessment actually ends up being what we then use to update the management plan, updating the 103 management actions, which we anticipate some will go away and some will be adapted to better address where we are right now. Just as an example, many of the management actions in the CMP were set up to do baseline studies. And so now that we have a lot of that information, we can now sort of build more action, implementation actions based on those baseline studies. So what we're really seeking here is comments, because this isn't, this is just the first step in the actual updating of the CMP. That's why we're bringing it to you folks as a review and comment item. What Jim and team are doing is collecting all the comments that we received on the OAR from the various groups they've talked to, as well as from DLNR. We had a big meeting with DLNR 2 weeks ago. We have shared the OAR, I think it's with 70 plus individuals, agencies, and organizations asking for their input. And so we're in the process of collecting all of that. And then based on the input that we receive, along with our updated assessment, our own self-assessment, we'll be making the changes to the CMP as needed. So this is a long process, and at this point, again, we're just asking for comment. There's no approval per se that's needed. Well, I see Jim now. Jim does have a overview PowerPoint that I think will be helpful. It's just something that we've been using with the different groups that we've been meeting with. And in the PowerPoint, it outlines a specific kind of feedback or questions that we're asking for input on. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So I'm going to share my screen for this one since we have a presentation. So everybody should now see this CMP Management Action MEU1 Outcome Analysis Report. And the Outcome Analysis Report, or OAR, is one of the items specified in this management action of the CMP, and it's designed to build on the annual reports that OMKM and CMS has been preparing and summarize new data as it does so, and analyze trends, consider the impacts of the management actions that have been implemented, are being implemented, and summarize future management actions that may be needed. Also present a status of the management actions, which is again building on those long tables that you have seen in the annual reports, and evaluate progress towards the desired outcomes. And this last item is very much similar to what Kuivalu did for DLNR. So we've submitted this OAR to participating stakeholders and agencies, and that includes DLNR, who we've already met with once, and we should be getting feedback from soon. We've also reached out to Department of Hawaiian Homelands, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and other individuals we've been coordinating with related to this topic. We're collecting their feedback, and that will be used to finalize the OAR, but more importantly, to inform the update of the CMP management actions. Now, in Chapter 2 of the OAR, we cover the cultural resources and the natural resources. You're probably familiar with the CMP. It has 14 management actions related to cultural resources and 18 related to natural resources. Covers quite a long range of topics. But the first thing we do in each section, and there are many sections in Chapter 2, from cultural, geologic, hydrologic, botanical, invertebrates, mammals, etc. So the first thing in each one of those sections is we cover the new information. And we have tables like this. This is a table from the cultural update. And so we have listed here the work that's been done to identify and evaluate the cultural resources in the UH management area. And our first question to everybody that's participating in our review is, have we included and summarized all important new information that has become available since the CMP was approved? And if you think that something is missing, we'd like to know what it is and what we should be including in the outcome analysis report, so that as we consider updates to the CMP management actions, everybody is fully informed. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to put the questions back up. The second topic we cover for each one of these resources is the trends. And it's difficult to identify trends for a number of reasons. There's a high degree of variation among some of the data because of seasonal, natural, and social forces influencing the resources and the management activities. And you may remember that many of the management actions were specifically written and designed to collect baseline data where baseline data didn't exist. And when we do not have pre-CMP baseline data, it becomes very hard to look for trends just because the data hasn't accumulated over a sufficient period. One of the few places we do have pre-CMP data is when it comes to VICU bugs. And this graph shows some of that variation that we believe just naturally occurs in the environment. And talking with Jessica Kirkpatrick, she says in 2021, we're going to see this graph bounce up again, but it's been bouncing up and down with this natural variation over time. And where we can, we look for trends and identify them. However, it's very difficult to do that. So our second question is, are we identifying the trends in the resources or the lack thereof accurately? And if we're not, what revisions do you think should be made? Third topic is, what are the impacts of the management actions? So here we have a photograph of the ranger's soft gate, and we're considering, well, what is the benefit, ideally a benefit, or if there are adverse effects related to these management actions, what are they? But again, it's difficult to establish a causal relationship between the actions and the benefit. For many of the same reasons, it's difficult to identify the trends. Nevertheless, we believe that the implementation of the management actions has had and will continue to have beneficial effects on Mauna Kea's cultural and natural resources. Now, the last thing we talk about in each section is the need for new management actions, but we do not currently believe that any entirely new management actions are needed. There are 103 management actions in the CMP, and they cover nearly every topic that you can imagine. And we believe that through adapting the management actions, we can provide sufficient opportunity to incorporate new concepts and address any perceived shortcomings. So rather than creating new management actions, we'll just take the ones we have and massage them, adapt them, add to them, so that we're creating this update. So that's chapter 2. Now looking at chapter 3, we look at the other 10 desired outcomes and their management actions. We provide a summary of the activities that have been taking place. One example is the Mauna Kea Speaker Series. And we consider the status of each of the management actions. So again, this is primarily a building on the annual reports. And our third question, are there any specific adaptations to the existing management actions that you believe are warranted? And if so, exactly what would those adaptations be? Next, do you believe that any entirely new management actions would be beneficial? And if so, what would they be? Now, chapter 4, we get into the progress towards desired outcomes. So this provides the university's own assessment of their achievement of the desired outcomes. It also refers to Kuivalu's assessment, which was done for DLNR, and we believe that the two assessments are largely consistent, and that is that the desired outcomes are largely being achieved, and that refinement and adaptation of the management actions along with new approaches to how they are implemented by the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship, will improve and make greater strides towards achieving the desired outcomes. So our next question, do you concur with the assessment of the progress towards the desired outcomes? And if not, how should the discussion be revised? Now, our next step, as I mentioned, is to adapt the CMP management actions. And that is what is called for in Management Action MEU2. So it's informed by the OAR. It will involve a much wider range of stakeholders. It'll be a more public process. But we wanted to have this opportunity to work with the stakeholders that have had the most history and knowledge of managing Mauna Kea before we move into actually crafting these adaptations to the management actions. Now, our goal is to complete the process, and the process involves finishing the OAR and finishing the adaptations to the management actions to the point that the BLNR approves them in less than a year. Now, this is a review of the 5 questions, and we'll open it up for discussion at this point. I will say, in addition, that we've received comments from Doug Simons and a few other people, and we've been working on addressing those comments, and we've received some good feedback from people already.
So Jim, as you said, I sent around to everybody my comments earlier. First of all, it's an extremely well-written document and very meticulous, and I could tell a lot of care had gone into writing it. So I think you're very close to having the final version with this initial draft, at least in my opinion. Can you go back one slide?
Sure. Let me see. Oops, wrong one. There we are.
So what's your confidence level on that 4th bullet to be able to finish this thing up in a year?
Well, that's always a good question. And we've, like I said, as soon as we do receive comments, and we've already been working through the comments that you provided, you had a lot of good corrections, and we apologize for some of the lazy grammar in there. But we're making those improvements, and as we get people's input, we're already working on what these adaptations to the management actions may be. And we're already penciling in when those management action adaptations will be ready for the review of this board and the Environment Committee and other stakeholders. And right now, we're feeling pretty good about it. But it remains to be seen what kind of comments and input we do receive, especially from DLNR. I expect to receive their comments in the next week.
So Doug, I'll just add a little bit more. DLNR in particular, their input is real critical. So we did have a meeting with them, as I indicated a couple of weeks ago. I think there were about 25 people from various divisions within DLNR who attended. And we did get some feedback at that point, but for the most part, people were just still getting familiar with the document. Because of their importance, and eventually, they are the entity that will approve this document. All of their comments are being collected by a single person there, and will be delivered to us in a summarized and composite form. So we're anxiously looking forward to seeing what they say. The meeting itself, I think, was basically positive. I mean, there were questions about community engagement, obviously. But I can't say that they spent all of their time there. There was some questions about from their DoCare folks about enforcement, especially now that we have administrative rules. But the question was not so much about what is UH going to do to enforce their administrative rules. It was more a comment about the need for more resources being dedicated overall to all of the different agencies that have enforcement kuleana in some form or fashion. So that was actually a very positive. But we're still awaiting their feedback. And as I said, that was a critical meeting for us. We wanted to do that one early in the process. The other thing I'll say is, as I indicated, we've sent this document out to a wide range of people, many of whom are groups that we've been meeting with on the master plan, inclusive of faculty at both UH Hilo and UH Manoa, inclusive of some of the folks who have been vocal critics of the university, welcoming their input. Jim, I don't know how much is actually sort of starting to trickle in or come in, because I know it's a long document. But we've thrown the net wide and said, this is our assessment of how we've been doing. Let us know what you think. So making an effort, and I think that itself will provide some reassurances, hopefully, to the BLNR when it comes time for them to take action.
And we've also been working closely, of course, with the CMS staff and their thoughts on how the management actions have been effective or not to date, and how they feel they should be adapted as we go forward. And so their input has been very helpful. And of course, all the data that is in the report is thanks to many of them. And we've been, like I said, working with them and kind of priming the pump as far as being able to get these adaptations drafted rapidly once we do have people's input. And so we can move to the next step in an efficient way.
You've been getting a lot of comments?
No, not yet. It's been, I think, almost just a few days, over a month, since most of the stakeholders have had the document. So we should be getting things soon.
I did appreciate your comments, Doug, and it did provide, good context for me, because I think I was leaning towards, your analysis as far as the report being, very objective and comprehensive. So thank you, Jim, for your work.
My pleasure. I mean, it's building on all the work that CMS has been doing over the years.
The tables that summarized numerous professional peer-reviewed documents, I thought was really impressive. I read every table in detail and recognized the depth and breadth of work sort of in conjunction or parallel to OGCAM or CMS. And that was kind of a statement unto itself to see that range of sort of related but external research that's been conducted over the past 10 to 20 years on Mauna Kea. Again, my sort of overarching concern is that it reflected a lot of environmental interests, and I would love to see it reflect more cultural interest going forward. It's discussion we've had before and observations made before, but it was even acknowledged in the document that more progress has been made on the environmental fronts than they have in advancing a cultural interest on Mauna Kea. So I'm not quite sure how to achieve that, but that imbalance is pretty obvious in the record to date.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's a fair assessment, Doug. I would agree.
So do you think anybody has an idea why it's that way? Is it that there wasn't enough focus, or was it more getting enough interested cultural people to participate? My feeling is the opportunity has been there, and the environmentalists have done a really good job getting involved and understanding and bringing their issues, up front and forthright. And I'm kind of wondering why it wasn't the case, from the cultural side, and trying to figure out, because I think that also leads into our discussion about community engagement.
Yeah.
Because that's the group that, has been silent or not contributing to any, any meaningful input.
My own thinking on this, Roberta, is that, between TMT, the process we went through to develop and implement and get approval for the administrative rules, and sort of all of the things that have kind of resulted as or come out of those initiatives. Walls have been built, and so it has been noticeably more difficult to be able to sit down and get meaningful input and just dialogue, quite frankly, about some of the issues of concern. And I don't think that it's helped that, everything is now being played out in no offense, Diana, but in the legal system. I don't think that
No offense taken.
I don't think it's conducive to it's by nature, it's an adversarial system. So we have to find other ways to work around it. So I think it's a combination of things that have sort of come up. I do think the original Kahuku Mauna was active in a different way. And so I think, as I've been talking with Kahuku Mauna themselves, there's opportunities for looking at how they may need to change how they interact and engage with the community as well. Yeah, I don't think it's any one thing, but I do think there definitely have been walls that have developed that have made it really hard to be able to sit down and sort of have just an open discussion about issues.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Go ahead, Jim.
Sorry, I was just going to say that many of the management actions in the cultural section of the CMP were those related to collecting some background information, like completing archaeological studies, generating some policy related to, for instance, the stacking of rocks, things of that nature. And many of those management actions are now considered complete. But as people are identifying, there's definitely a desire to do better as far as certain cultural outreach and participation and learning and education goes. And so that portion of the CMP is one of the ones we're going to be looking at very carefully of how do we adapt those management actions. And of all the sections where new management actions may be appropriate, that cultural section might be the one. So anyone with good ideas on that, it's always welcome.
Well, thinking about sort of historically, there was an example that manifests itself with Kalakumana in a kind of puzzling way. And this was all the way back in 2017 with the unsolicited proposal by John DeFries for what we called the Hawaiian Celestial Nomenclature proposal. And I remember when that was first brought to Kalakumana, the idea of an unsolicited proposal to advance Hawaiian culture, I think, threw them for a loop. It's always kind of a monitoring function. It's a passive function. It's, like Kalakumana is an oversight role. But the idea of actually trying to advance a new idea pertaining to Maunakea culture was one that, first of all, there's a spectacular success in the end. But it makes me wonder if there wasn't some way to solicit that from the community to provide sponsorship or whatever to help enable it. But again, to drive forward these cultural initiatives, that one just sort of fell out of the blue sky. But it does show you that if there's a will and there's interest, there are ways to bring resources to bear to drive these Hawaiian initiatives about Mauna Kea. But you have to find a way to generate that first sort of kernel. And that one, the fact that and the only one I'm aware of in my tenure on MKMB, where there was that unsolicited proposal from the Hawaiian community to do something really kind of neat like that. Somehow we got to get more of that.
Yeah, I think with the adoption of the CMP and the 103 management actions, it's going to sound odd, but we may have lost focus on the big picture because the focus became getting those management actions implemented and getting them done.
Right.
But they all had a larger purpose, right? So, and I think that example is a good one, Doug. It's not just that it came out of nowhere. It was just the fact that it was addressing a larger purpose that we had lost focus on.
So I guess so my understanding right now is we've received the OAR and board members are most welcome to provide input to Greg or Jim, because the more, I do believe that the more feedback you get, it's going to be through that process that you might come across a kernel of, really amazing stuff that could happen. It's really creating the opportunity to generate the interest and the, and maybe it's the courage to bring forth, new things and new ideas. So maybe that's, the angle that needs to change, both from Maunakea Management Board as well as the university, is that, it's, we want feedback, and there really is no hidden agenda. And maybe that is, the perspective that has caused a lot of mistrust too.
Yeah.
Got to break that wall down, right, before
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
rebuild the bridge between the groups. Yeah. Well, between everybody, frankly, right? Okay. If there's no further comments, or anybody else have any comments or questions?
Roberta,
Yes. Mm.
I have got to complete an obligation in daylight, so I'll have to step away to attend to something outdoors. I do want to thank Jim. I always enjoy their presentations. I do have one quick question before I step away. In your panoramic view, the frontal view of Mauna Kea, is that a southeastern slope?
Oh, and the presentation?
Yeah.
Oh, let me see.
You can get back to me. I don't want to.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Yeah, it's a wonderful frontal introduction to the mountains. So thank you again, Roberta. I'll catch up with you folks later. Good to see you all. Take care.
Hi.
Thank you, Billy.
Well, I guess on that note, anybody else have any other comments? Otherwise, we'll move to item C, which is information and discussion on the Hokukea decommissioning and the new educational telescope.
Okay, so Jim, you and Julia can sign off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Julia.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the detailed information that Doug had asked for. Doug and Julie had asked for. The consultants and folks at our facilities group who I'm working with on these two projects, both were either on vacation and or working on other projects last week. So I wasn't able to get any further information. So I have nothing to report at this time. Hope to have some at our next meeting to at least report back. And as I said, when I first brought this up at our last meeting, I just want to make sure that it's flagged. It's not something, a decision. The decoupling of those two projects are not a decision that has to be made tomorrow. But I know it's going to take some discussion. So I'll come back with the information, more detailed information on the two timelines and sort of the critical paths at our next meeting.
Okay. Is there a rough idea, Greg, at this point when we're going to need to really push for a recommendation by the board, by us?
I think it's going to be somewhere in the late 2022, early 2023 timeframe.
Oh.
And I know that seems far off, but time will it'll be here before we know it. The unknown right now is that I'm not clear on is exactly the timeline on some of the permitting requirements after the CDUP for the decommissioning, for both projects. There are other permitting requirements, yeah. So that's part of what we're trying to assess here.
Okay. All right, so I guess the next item on the agenda is information and discussion, continuation with the community engagement conversation. But I also see item number 7, well, I guess if the group so feels, moving to executive session to consult with our board's attorneys on, questions and issues as it relates to board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities pursuant to HRS 92 sorry, I can't read this, 5C4 regarding community engagement. So I'm not sure if there's anything to report. Diana, I don't know if you and Julie had
Not
met.
been able to get together with Julie. So hasn't happened.
Okay.
So I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but I do want us to try to do something to move that needle before DLNR is in a position to make a decision, because I would like DLNR to see that there's some real action going on, because I have a bad feeling about it, but that's just my feeling, so it could be wrong. But I do think that the university could shore up its position a great deal by addressing that issue a little bit more forthrightly. And I don't think it's going to get done by Julie and I talking together. I think it's going to have to be something that I have no good ideas. One of the things that I did consider, but I wanted to talk with you folks about it first before I did anything like this. I know people who are part of the opposition because I paddle. Kiahi is our coach. And we have people in that club who are very vocal. Whose husbands are, among the kupuna arrested. So one of the things that we could do is I could approach some of those people, some of the people from the paddling community who I talk to and I know really well, and start talking to them and try to see if I can get them to give me some ideas as to how we might improve, what's wrong, why is it wrong, why are you doing this? I mean, I have my own thoughts about why, but I don't know whether they are correct or not. I've talked to you folks about them before. So I would be happy to start doing that. I mean, we're supposed to be going out and getting information. I mean, aren't we supposed to be the forum that we can get public input? But I don't want to do that unless that's something that the board concurs is a good idea, because it's kind of like taking a tiger by the tail, yeah? So that's one idea that I had that we might do. And I don't know whether those folks will talk to me, but they might.
So Diana, can I ask a question?
Sure.
As coach of the canoe club, is Kiahi approachable on this issue? I mean, do the others feel that he's approachable?
I don't know. I haven't ever talked to anybody about Kiahi's involvement. I know he's with Pueo, right?
Yeah.
And we've had, I mean, everybody seems to get along. Everybody's still in the canoe club. Okay. So from that part, I haven't seen anybody. I haven't seen any disrespect by anybody. Okay. So from that standpoint, I don't know. I have talked to Kiahi, but he is so busy, and basically I think what he would prefer is that I come up with a plan, but I'm not able to come up with a plan unless I have people that I can talk to, right? That I can do that. So one of the things that occurred to me, because especially since Kiahi is not here again, is that we look at trying to set our meetings at a time when he can attend. I think that's an important issue we ought to be addressing, because obviously if he can't attend our meetings, we're losing the benefit of his resource.
Yeah. So the reason I asked, because I asked the question I did, is because I spoke with Keahi today.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And he did indicate that there's just probably no way that he can continue to be on the board if the meetings are going to be at this time. It's not just his work obligations, but as we all know, there's been some personal matters he's had to attend to as well.
Yes.
So what Keahi actually talked to me about was a different role perhaps for him with the board. If we're going to continue to meet at 5 in the afternoon, which we all agreed that we thought that this would be a better time in general for the general public. I think the pandemic hasn't really given us an opportunity to really test that, but I think that was the thinking. And I'm not sure right now with Julie's schedule that she would be able to accommodate, a morning meeting like we used to have. But basically, Keahi told me, he would only be able to attend meetings either on a Saturday or if it was in the morning.
Yeah. See, the problem
what he said was that he would be willing to
busy.
reconsider his role and perhaps play a different role with the board. And so the thing that you're talking about in terms of reaching out struck me as when I was listening to you talk, struck me as one way that we might explore sort of a different way to work with Keahi. Because I hate to send you in there by yourself. And I don't know that Julie would be.
These are my friends.
Yeah.
These are my friends.
Okay.
I know. Let me tell you who some of them are. Eva Nanaoli and Jimmy Nanaoli are I paddled with Eva for 11 years. Her husband is always trying to talk to my husband about legal, issues. My husband doesn't practice anymore. He's a retired judge, so he doesn't want to do that. But those are, that would be very easy to do.
Okay.
And I'm sure I would get an earful. But the point about getting the earful is that you're listening, right? Someone is listening. And then you try to say, well, okay, what can we do better? How can we do it better? And it cannot be, no, we're not going to do anything because no TMT. Well, there's bigger issues. The university has the lease there. So you can change the conversation away from TMT and you can try and move it. So there are things that can be done, but I got to tell you folks, I don't want to keep ragging at everybody. I really don't. And I feel like every time we have a meeting, I'm sitting here going, we should do this. We should do this. And I just don't want to do that to everybody. You guys have much more experience than I do. I'm from the outside coming into an organization that's been ongoing for a long period of time. I can just tell you, I have children who feel that there shouldn't be any telescope anymore up there and who are not active, but vocal with me. So, some of the things that I've said during our meetings are because I'm hearing this over the years from people. So I'm coming with that information. But if it's not helpful and if it's something the board doesn't want to do, I don't want to do it.
Can I Diana, that's really interesting that you know Eva and Jimmy, because I know them very well too. And I just saw both of them at Kalepa's funeral, and he wants to talk. He wants to get together, and I told him I would love to get together. So
why don't you do that?
I would be willing to meet with you. To go with you to meet with them just to listen, because I think, I think I'm hopeful, and I'm pretty sure we can get there. There's some common ground. I don't even know where we start to get there, but I've known Eva and Jimmy for years, and I love what they do. And I respect.
Wonderful to do it. It's wonderful to do it then. the thing is, it's like, you were saying, Greg, litigation is a bad way to do it. But when you're even in litigation, you have to talk. And sometimes it's so impossible to do, but unless you try, you never get anywhere. So, and we've been talking about it, and I don't see us making much progress. Julie is so busy. I really don't want to keep, Julie, I don't, she's like, I think the feeling I get from her, and she's so helpful, is that, oh my gosh, I'd have to teach you all that has gone on, because, I'll ask a question and there's all this background that I don't know about. All I know is I see this issue and I'm looking for ways to solve it. So I think starting there would be a great place to start. Absolutely.
I mean, and I'm not, there's no way that I know everything either on Maunakea or anything, but
Right.
I respect them enough to want to sit down, and I was hoping to do it just one-on-one, but I would love to do it with you. I would love to start a conversation.
It doesn't need to be with me. It just needs to happen. So if they're saying they want to do it, go for it, Roberta, and I'll go with you if you want me to, but go for it. That's where it starts.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I will reach out to him, because he even asked me for my phone number and my email address. So maybe I'll start there and just see, what could be helpful.
I think that is a
Because
fantastic
I
idea.
don't really know what he's looking for, but he's trying to reach out to have a better understanding.
And I would vote for both of you to meet with them, just because I think it's important that Maunakea Management Board have,
Yeah.
multiple engagements, if you will.
Well, I'm happy to go.
You happy? Okay. Well, let me reach out and see, what, his comfort level is. And, I will get back to you and, the rest of the board if I, exactly what the conversation is. But I think that's a good start, Diana.
Great.
Very helpful.
Thank you for throwing that out, because, I'm happy. I mean, really, this just reminds me how, I'm not Hawaiian, but I've known them for so long and I respect them, and he reached out to me. So I will reach out back to him, and then I'll be in touch.
That sounds great, Roberta. That's some really good news, actually, because that's one of the kupuna arrested. He's got his trial coming up, and he wants to talk. That's great.
His heart is, with Ahapunana Leo, as well as Henry Opukaha'ia. They not so now I just forget all of the names of the different schools, and then Eva I've known forever through Ahapunana Leo. Yeah. Probably
Navahi, right?
Oh yeah, Navahi. Yeah, Kalani Opu'u, right? And Eva and Namaka and all of them. So Kawanoi, yeah. Okay, well I will do that. That's easy, and then let's see what happens from there.
Okay, and I'll take my cue from you, Roberta, from what you talked to them about. If they want to sit with you alone, that's fine. Greg, I'm happy to go too. Let's just start the process.
Okay.
That's great. So, along these lines, last week at Maunakea Observatory Directors Meeting, we received a briefing on a program that the observatories had sponsored called Kama'aina Connections. And I'll let Doug talk a little bit more about that, but we had a chance to sit with a group of Kama'aina employees who work at various observatories, who for the last, I don't know, Doug, what it's been 8 or 9 months, went through a program that allowed them a safe space to give them voice about what it's like to be Kama'aina working in astronomy in Hawaii on Mauna Kea. And these folks have very, very technical and critical positions. That was clear to me. And one of the things that came out of that briefing was a willingness on their part to help astronomy build connections with the community and improve communications with the community between astronomy and the astronomy community and the broader community. So Doug, one of the things that I've since followed up with Rich on was, and I need to, we weren't able to get into the details yet, but my idea is whether some of these folks might be willing to not facilitate or speak on UH's behalf or anything like that, but whether they would be willing to convene talk story sessions in a garage somewhere or out in the park somewhere with a group of their networks where we can just start to talk about not TMT or not anything specific, unless they want to talk about those things, but just talk about, you know, the responsibility that we're trying to execute in managing and stewarding the Mauna, and getting, you know, just get into whatever topics people want to get into, master plan, CMP, whatever, you know, lease, TMT, if that's what they want to talk to. Rich thought there might be some possibilities there with some of the folks who went through the program. I don't know if they're called fellows or whatever, but I got to tell you, Doug, I was very impressed by that group of people. Very impressed with what they seemed to get out of the program, and then the leadership, the willingness to step into a leadership role with the offers that they made to help serve as bridges for the astronomy community and the rest of the community. So I'm following up with Rich on that, but that's another sort of opportunity for us to maybe engage in smaller networks, because like you, Diana, and like all of us, you know, we all have friends and family on all sides of all the issues, and everything in between. And
you know, I have to tell you,
just talking.
It would just be such a shame if the university loses that lease. It would just be horrible, because what we have to offer our students, that, you know, people that want to go into that area, is unmatched anywhere, and that can be so great for the university. So it would just be terrible.
Agreed.
So I want, you know, moving the conversation away from TMT, I think would be the best. Looking for other ways to communicate.
Yeah.
So, well, we just have to keep trying. Roberta, that's really great news.
Well, let's start and see
Yes.
where it goes.
Yes,
Okay.
start small.
Okay, so I guess we've covered item D, and I will reach out and work with you, Diana, to see if, you know, we can get a conversation with Jimmy and Eva, and then you know, yeah, I know, Doug, you guys have been, the Mauna Kea Observatory group has been really working hard to get you know, your local employees to feel comfortable in engaging groups to, or facilitate groups to have, you know, those talk story sessions. So I think that's, you know, fantastic.
Rich has done done a nice job. The second cohort should be organized in August. So we'll have, that's on my 15 or 20 or so that have been through the program by the end of the year. And I'm aware of multiple sort of talk story opportunities that are being aligned right now with various KCP members. So, like I said, I think Christine briefed everybody a while ago. That's one of the elements of their overall community engagement
But
plan.
I think it would be really good to start getting all the input, and,
Mhm.
Diana, you and Julie as the community engagement team, I mean, just to start looking at comments and feedback, I think is a good starting point.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody have any other comments or questions regarding community engagement? And I don't think there's a need this time to go into executive session. So item number 8, as far as announcements, I guess the next public meeting will be on Tuesday, July 6th, at 5 o'clock. I think the question I was wondering, Greg, is today's the, no, am I getting confused here? No, it's the 8th, it's the 6th, right? July 6th.
Yeah, first Tuesday.
Yeah, July.
Yeah.
Because,
Six.
I guess this month we have 5 Tuesdays. So will we be holding a special meeting on the 15th, or you think the 22nd?
Right now we have it for the 15th. I'll ask people to hold that, please. I need to double check what we have queued up. I believe we'll be ready to bring forward some of the Hokukea and New Education Telescope documents for initial review.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we'll, at least to introduce them to you folks. There's no action needed right now, but I think it's helpful to at least introduce some of these documents to you folks early, even before Maunakea, Kahukumana and Environment Committee are completed their reviews.
Okay.
So if you could just hold the 15th for now, and then I'll get back to you.
All right.
June 15th or July 15th?
June 15th.
15th. So we are now today, June 1st, public meeting. Then we'll have a special meeting on June 15th, which is the 3rd Tuesday. And then we will convene for our public meeting on Tuesday, July 6th.
Correct.
Yes. I don't have any other announcements. Anybody else have announcements?
No.
If not, it is now 6:27, not quite 6:30, and unless you have one more chance to stop me, but I will otherwise adjourn the meeting. Okay, I don't see anybody frantically wanting the microphone, so we're going to adjourn early. It is now 6:28, and I will see everybody on Tuesday, June 15th. And I will be in touch, Diana,
Thanks.
later this week.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Gary.
Bye.
Thanks, Gary and Carrie.